I was listening to a guided meditation last night on the Park Bench Project, I think it's called, with Jim Self on YouTube. And he said something that was so simple, but it was such a beautiful way of explaining it. So I've worked around the authentic self for a decade and a half now. And of course, it has everything to do with self-acceptance and self-love through that self-acceptance. It's really about cultivating a beautiful, harmonious, trusting, loving, nurturing relationship with oneself. And he was talking about frequency. He was talking about dimensions, which really dimensions are just states of being. So when you hear people talking about 3D, 4D, 5D, they're a state of being, a state of consciousness, or you could say a frequency. And frequency is also just a state of being. It's like, what bandwidth are you on? But he described it in a very simple way, which is 3D tends to be, there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of division, right? And so we tend to not like ourselves in that because it's all about the I'm not good enough, right? Where he says, when you go into the energy of 5D, it's the energy of I like me. And it was just such a simple way of saying it, going into this energy of I like me, because I've seen, working with people for so long now that they don't like themselves. They think something's wrong with themselves, or there's some kind of judgment, even if it's not all of you, but a part of you that you don't like. And I just thought, oh, this is such a beautiful simplification of how, of the differences in these energies. So I want to talk today on this theme of how do we get into that I like me energy. And I'm also going to bring in what Darius Wright was talking about. What are the 3 highest frequencies? So we're going to talk about these things and probably more. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So there was this real sweetness of Jim's self, like threading through, the whole guided meditation conversation, just this, I like me. And every time he talked, he dropped those words and it just made me smile. It really made me smile. And he was talking about how, when we're in that 5th dimensional frequency, and some people hate these terms. I'm just using these terms because they're becoming a kind of common language. So I'm using it for lack of a better term. But he's talking about how that kind of 5th dimensional frequency, state of being, consciousness is one of joy and bliss and that kind of smiling energy. And I've shared this in videos that I've shared on my social media, that I just telling little stories of, there was one where after I had been ill and I was better, and then I was just going into like the big supermarket that I always find kind of quite overwhelming because it's like a massive warehouse, and how all that happened, that is I came up and there was just, organic grapes. And I was so excited to be putting my little box of organic grapes into my basket and just feeling this absolute joy, bliss, gratitude. I've had many moments like that where it's in the total mundane moments of life for no reason whatsoever that this just beautiful burst of love and gratitude and joy and bliss, I can feel it in my heart. I can feel it in my entire body, and just this happiness, like really for no reason. There's nothing that came up in that moment where it's like, oh, I got this news, or it was nothing. And I think this is really when people talk about a 5th dimensional frequency, I think it is that. It's a state of being, and it's a state of being where, it really does imbue a lot of gratitude and joy. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that when we dip down that it's like, oh, all of a sudden you're bad and you're very low vibe and low frequency. And I don't get in, if you know my work well enough, you know that I don't get into the whole good, bad, right, wrong of it. So like I've said in the past, I allow myself that when the shadow does come up, when uncomfortable feelings do come up, when I have those days where my mood is down and whatever is going on, I allow it. I allow it because I also know that the more I allow it, the more I move through it, right? the quicker I'll move through it. But we are still kind of ping-ponging back and forth between these two frequencies. And if you look out into the world, you can really see it in a very kind of stark manner that there, as I've said, if you followed me since 2020, especially, but even before, but since 2020, I was like, oh, there's really two paths here. There's the path of love or there's the path of fear. And the path of fear will keep us in that third dimensional state of judgment, whether it's, normally it's both. If we're judging others, we're also judging ourselves. If we're judging ourselves, we're judging others. Fear, division, competition, the more challenging emotions of anger and fear and anxiety and frustration and all of these things. And, I'm not saying that these things are bad. Again, getting out of right and wrong and good and bad. But at some point, it's like, well, do we want to evolve beyond these? Because it's a limitation. I'll say there's nothing wrong with fear and anger if we take them as messengers and we listen to them. We give ourselves what we need, and then therefore we can alchemize them into a higher frequency of gratitude and joy. And it's not the false positivity. I don't believe in that either, right? I'm just reiterating this because it's so important. It's not just about, I'm going to be happy and positive all the time and then neglect the shadow. We are most powerful when we face and embrace the shadow, and then we come into genuine gratitude, genuine bliss. And then we're genuinely optimistic or positive, but it's not something that's forced. It's not a facade. It's not a mask. It's not an outfit. You get what I'm saying. But to wallow is to be the victim. To wallow is to go into those archetypes that I talked about a couple weeks ago. That also doesn't serve us, right? Because that's getting into a kind of stagnancy. And I find that when we're stagnant, which is very different than being in a state of being, which is not non-doing, because being is actually just very much alive, but it's a different, it's not just action, right? The being is the feminine. That's like, okay, in my being, in my stillness, I can hear, I can feel, I can connect. And then from that place, I take action. So we're transitioning, right? We're going through a massive, massive transition, and it has to be done organically. It can't be done in an artificial way of just trying to pretend, because the pretending will get tiring. And then also the pretending lends itself to judgment of self when we fall off that kind of benchmark that we're trying to keep up on the whole time. That it's like, oh, then when we have a day where we feel sad or we feel, whatever, just down, angry, irritable, then there's a lot of self-judgment. And what we're learning, if we're coming out of frequencies, one of the two, I would say, I don't like using these words, but for lack of a better term, the two lower frequencies tend to be judgment and fear. Right? But judgment is really such a source of pain. It's such a source of unnecessary suffering, which I've done an episode on that. So you can go check that one out. So on the other end of it, what Darius Wright was talking about is the three highest frequencies. The three frequencies that are the most powerful are unconditional love. No surprise there. Integrity and authenticity. When we are in unconditional love, obviously that to me is like we are in our source energy. Our source energy is that of unconditional love. But unconditional love, like I'm not sure if any human being here has fully mastered that, because unconditional love really means unconditional. We still lean towards conditional love as no matter how much, like if people are saying love and light, love and love, love and light, but then they're, judging somebody's opinion, which we all do. And we just have to take self-responsibility for that. Like, again, no self-judgment on that, but just taking accountability, having accountability of like, yeah, sometimes I judge. I judge other people's opinions or choices or perspectives or views or the way that they do things. But we're learning, I think, through awareness. Whenever we have awareness, it gives us the opportunity to reflect and then show up in different ways. And that's our evolution. And that's our evolution as humans. That's the evolution of our consciousness right now. And that is the part of this transition, is that we're coming out of judgment. We're coming out of division. We're coming out of the I don't like myself and I don't like you into I accept myself wholly and fully. I am a whole person. I am worthy. I am lovable. I love myself. I like me. And into that natural state of bliss and joy and gratitude that comes from that place of worth. And I like me. Like, I really like that term because it makes me smile every time. Like, oh, I like me. Like, do you like you? It's really sweet. It's so sweet and so simple. And, you know, this is what I think where we can look at this as an evolution, you know, oh, okay, we're going higher up in the frequency. But the way that I view it is we're just going back home. We're just going back home to who we truly are, our innate nature, which to me is one of unconditional love. Now, I love that the other most powerful, potent frequencies are integrity and authenticity, because I value them greatly, like really, really, you know, we could value many things, but I would say those are two: integrity, authenticity, and truth, being honest. I think they are values that I value beyond words, beyond measure. But what I love about those is that they encapsulate so many different qualities, right? When we're showing up in integrity, there is all of these things that I've been talking about. There's self-responsibility, there's accountability, there's sovereignty, there's truth and honesty. There's really standing and living from a place of our inner power, not power over others, but the power of our, which leads to the next one, authenticity. When we truly are who we are and fully accepting and fully loving of all of ourselves, every nook and cranny, the human self, the divine self, everything, the mistakes that we make, the flaws that we have, the thoughts that we have that we don't like sometimes, the emotions that we have that we don't like sometimes, all of it. If we can love, accept, and embrace and unconditionally love ourselves, then we really come into that place of integrity and power. And then we show up in the world as that, and like, wow, like we have no idea the magnitude of our presence and our ability and our capacity when we are out of that state of judgment and into the state of, I like me. Because then when we're more accepting with ourselves, we'll be more accepting of other people's humanity. I've certainly experienced that firsthand, you know, when in relationship, as an example of when I could observe that person was not accepting of their own humanity, they would be totally unaccepting of mine. You know, I remember one partner that had unfortunately learnt through his education, you know, that being sick is like a bad thing and you're weak and you're ostracized and you're put at the end of the, you know, it's like purgatory or whatever. You're like the leper or whatever, you know, so there's no compassion. There was no care. There was no support. And so the way he would show up, if I got sick, it was like, oh God, it's such an inconvenience and I'm just going to leave. You have to be on your own. And there was no care. There was no empathy. There was no nurture. And it was like, yeah, because that's what he had learned. And that's what he did within himself. I think he's probably, hopefully evolved from that point, but this was a while ago. But, you know, as within, so without, right? And unfortunately, a lot of these things are things that we've been taught. And Jim Self was also talking about that. It's like, you know, we've been taught all of these ways of being. I'm kind of putting it in my own words, but that really we've been taught to be self-judgmental. We've been, you know, if we look at, it's interesting, I found a really lovely school for my daughter, but then I'm not so keen on the teacher that's come in because she kind of really represents this very old-fashioned educating, which is so ironic because it's a really alternative school, but really coming in and it's like, I'm the boss and there's this kind of, you know, I'm disappointed in you and all of these things where I'm like, oh my God, these words, like what the effect that has on children. Like, I don't think she has any clue, obviously, like where that's going to potentially take a child in 10, 20 years. Our words are powerful, you know? And so that's like the old school, you know, we've been taught that we're not good enough. We are a disappointment. You know, we are lesser than, we don't have any inner authority. We have to raise our hands when we have something to say, or you can't say anything and you're not allowed to. I mean, like, wow. there's a part of me that's like, God, we're still living in that. And it's so kind of ridiculous because we are naturally, innately sovereign beings. So all of this is the unlearning to relearn, which is really to re-remember who we really are. So let's come to this beautiful, simple, I like me. So I want you to actually just tap into that right now. It's like, just close your eyes if you're not driving. If you're driving, do this at a later point, obviously. But if you can, if you're in a space, like take a moment to close your eyes and take a deep breath in and let it out. And just say to yourself, I like me. Like, feel into that. I like me. Now, for some of you, that might bring about like a smile. It might make you kind of want to chuckle. It's like, oh, that's kind of a funny, cute thing to say. For some people, the opposite could come up. Some of you listening might go, but I really don't like me. And so then I want you to feel what that feels like. Because what I would imagine that to feel like is sad, painful, lonely. So it's really important. It doesn't matter if it puts a smile on your face or if it makes you feel really sad. It's really important to recognize, how does it make me feel? What is my relationship to myself? If I'm in a place where when I say I like me and I go, no, I don't believe in myself. Nobody believes in myself. In me. I don't love me. Nobody loves me. I'm not lovable. I'm not likable. I'm not wanted. I'm not whatever the beliefs are, the limiting beliefs are. All that's indicating to us is that we need to go do the loving inner work, because that part still really needs our loving attention. That part is still believing a false story, and it is a false story. I know that it feels very personal and everyone has their unique story, but having worked with I don't know how many people over the last 15 years, it's all very much the same. Different story, same feeling. And so I can say it's a false story, it's an illusion, because I've also seen them be able to evolve beyond those states of being. And so if you listen to my last podcast about, or one or two ago, around archetypes, and our addiction sometimes to the archetypes, our addiction to the victim, our addiction to the martyr. And when I say addiction, maybe that's a little bit of a too charged of a word, but our habit, we're habituated, we're in the routine of, we're overly familiar, we're identified with. That's really the key word, is we're super identified with this state of being. And I think sometimes when we're in those states, it's really easy to feel like, well, there is no way out and there is no other way. Like, oh, I've tried, but I can't get out. And I'm going to tell you that there's always a way through and out. Through is the key word, right? If we try to get rid of, I think we make the journey a lot longer. Because getting rid of is not a state of acceptance. Moving through something is the action of acceptance, right? Two very, very different things. So some of you listening might still be in that place of, yeah, but I can't see a way out of this. I can't see it being different. And you might be very identified with the victim, because maybe it's totally, here's the thing. For the most part, there tends to always be a good reason for that belief. You know, maybe you've gone through a lot of hard things, a lot of hardships in your life. But here's the thing. We all have our story. Some of our lives and childhoods have been harder than others. But I'll give you a personal example. You know, I didn't have the easiest childhood. There were a lot of really big changes in my life. You know, we left my father when I was 3.5, 4, and I didn't see him for 15 years, and he was really a messed up person. So it was the best decision possible, because he really wasn't sane. And, you know, had different father figures and moved to different countries. And there's a lot of different things, a lot of changes, a lot of upheaval, a lot of like not being told what was going on. So a lot of confusion. And fast forward to when I was about 2021 and I was going to this woman that did shamanic and hypnotherapy, dream work, all of these things. She was really amazing. And I had this vision of being in child's pose on the floor, and there was just shattered glass all around me. And I just intuitively, immediately knew that what those shards of glass represented were all of the challenges and suffering and wounding and pains of my life, but that the reason that they were there, why I experienced these things, was because they gave me the ability to be empathic towards other human beings that have their own shards of glass, right? Their own stories. And even if the stories weren't exactly the same, the feeling could be very similar. And so it just gave me that understanding. And so I was able to always see things in my life through the lens of like, what can I take from this? What is the positive out of this? What is the lesson? What is the gift? So instead of letting it like devour me and completely victimize me, I was always able to transmute it and to take it. And it made me stronger, and it made me wiser, and it made me more empathic, and it made me more understanding. And it also, lovingly forced me to really have to go inside of myself and do a lot of the inner work, and to really look at the shadow, and to really understand how to be with pain. I've been both with physical pain and emotional pain, and having learned how to be with it, for me personally, has given me such a huge amount of freedom and liberation. And so this is why I do the work that I do, because I want to help other people liberate themselves from the suffering and the unnecessary suffering, and to come out of the victimization into, we don't have to identify with that. That doesn't have to be who we are. And to come into instead how maybe life is supporting you, or at the very least, how you have the power to transmute, transform, alchemize these things into your own version of wisdom and beauty and the medicine that you will pass on to other people. It doesn't mean you have to be a coach. It can be just in your presence with other people, in your empathy with other people, in your kindness towards other people. Again, as within, so without. So the more that you're self-accepting and non-judgmental and patient with yourself, the more you'll do that with other people. And that is the ripple that will change the world. 1,000,000%. When people go, oh, how can I make a difference as one person? You make a difference by your state of being. You make a difference by the frequency that you embody. You make a difference by how unconditionally loving, how you show up with integrity and authenticity and honesty every single day, right? And I think as we're kind of ping-ponging, my greatest teacher right now is my child, is my daughter. So Saturday, there was a part of the day where I just, I was premenstrual, I was tired, I hadn't slept very well for several days, and there was a few things. She was a bit in a mood as well, and so there was a point where we were both kind of frustrated, and not that we bumped heads, but there was a moment, and I said some things, and we were like pulled into a kind of social thing, so we couldn't talk about it then. And I was so tired that night, but we were fine. We were in a lovely space with each other. But yes, the next day, I really made the point to say, you know what, I'm really sorry what I said yesterday. I'm really sorry for that. This is what was going on for me. This is how I was feeling. But I can really, I can imagine that, it wasn't nice to hear that. And that, to me, those moments, again, I'm never saying these things to say like, look at what a good human being I am. I'm saying these things because I think I can definitely raise my hand and say, for me, when I was younger, I had too much pride sometimes, too much pride to say, God, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And it's not even about right or wrong, right? We don't want to get into that judgment, but whatever it is, whether it is just using those terms of I was wrong or I made a mistake or I'm just so sorry. I'm really sorry. I can imagine how that might have made you feel. And there isn't the defending of why I did it, but there's the explanation of what was going on for me to give context so that it was more understandable. But that's the self-accountability, self-responsibility to actually, take responsibility for our actions and how we make other people feel. And I think now, especially with the internet and people being able to be these kind of cyber bullies because there's no consequence. They don't see how their words make somebody feel. You know, we need to come into that accountability more often and it feels really good when you do it. That's part of the reason why I'm sharing it here, is because firstly, it makes such a big difference to the person that we maybe had the argument or we had the whatever uncomfortable exchange with. It makes them feel like, I could just see how it just lit up her face, and she really appreciated the apology. She really appreciated the explanation. But then for me also, it just felt so good. It felt actually very, very empowering. And it's not because like, oh, I'm such a good human being. Look at what a good example of a human being I am. It's not the facade. It's not the mask. That's like another, that's another trap, right? It's a genuine feeling of, oh, I'm coming back into a state of love. I'm shifting the energy. I'm shifting the frequency, because anytime we have a kind of exchange and we don't come to a resolution with it and we don't come back to love, we hold on to that. And that adds up as layer after layer after layer of density, right? And so we then later on, it's like we have so much that we need to forgive for, whether it's forgive others or forgive ourselves, or it's a lot of baggage. Let's in clear, just, terminology that everyone understands. It's a lot of baggage. But if we clear it as it comes like this, then we are constantly, it's like having fresh water running through, right? Nothing is getting stagnant. Nothing is backed up. It's like all the pipes are clean. All the energy lines are clean. And then it just allows for more energy to pass through, and more energy that is genuine energy, right? So it's okay if things come up. We're human. Sometimes our human self is going to be reactive. That's okay. We're learning how to be non-judgmental with that. And the more that we practice this non-judgment and acceptance and feeling it, and sure, taking self-responsibility, but bringing it back into that frequency of unconditional love, the less likely we are to go to that place of judgment, or the quicker we're going to catch ourselves when we do, and the quicker we're going to come to that point of resolution and to come back into unconditional love, because we will say, God, you know what? Sorry. I'm sorry in the way that I said that. That wasn't very kind or thoughtful of me. I take responsibility for that. I love you. So the faster that we can do that and come back into a state of unconditional love, the more that we can be in that frequency bandwidth of that quote unquote fifth dimensional state of being, where we're in the state of love and bliss and joy and gratitude. I mean, I don't know about you, what your experience is like, but whenever you come to a point of resolution and there is accountability, it feels really good. Because we come back into our heart, we come back into that unconditional love, and we're not throwing arrows, or we're not holding up shields. If you've ever been in a relationship where you get into a massive argument, and, I know some people that it's like they won't talk for days. Think about the density and the energy that is being held, not only within yourselves as individuals, but even in the house. Somebody walks in because, oh, what happened in here? It's heavy, it's dense. Think about if you do that time and time and time again. It's like another layer of paint and another layer of paint. And if you notice, when you have too many layers of paint, it's going to start to look like stiff and stale and crack, and it's not fresh, right? So it's really, I was going to say, it's really wonderful to keep the energy clear. Now, I don't mean being like, oh, let's pretend that didn't happen, and I'm just going to like metaphorically sage everything and poof, it all goes away. No, we have to genuinely work through it so that it naturally, organically dissipates, because energy will always reform itself, right? There's no death of energy. There's no death of consciousness. There's no death of your soul. That's why we are untouchable and we are infinite. But can it transform and transmute and alchemize into something else? Yeah, absolutely. And so that's what we're doing. This is why I really like the term that we're alchemists. We're emotional and energetic alchemists. I mean, also of thought, right? Every one of our bodies, you could say, we can alchemize that body, be it physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, energetic, etheric, right? So come back. I like me. I like me. How does that make you feel? And play with what is there. If it makes you feel good, do that more often. Remind yourself, check in with yourself. I like me. And again, if it doesn't bring out joy and happiness, like, oh, can I have compassion for that? Can I have compassion that in this moment I don't like me? And it's bringing up pain, and it's bringing up sadness, and it's bringing up maybe anger because it reminds me of why I don't like me, or how I felt like others don't like me or didn't like me when I was a kid or in my family or whatever it is. Then it's like, okay, that then don't tend to the story, tend to the feeling. How did that story make me feel? Or how did it make me feel? And then you go straight to the feeling, straight to the emotion, and you give yourself what you need and needed back then. But part of the invitation is let go of the story. The story is the story, and the story is in the past. If you keep on replaying the story, you keep on triggering the emotions, and then it comes into your present moment. And if you keep on living it in the present moment, you're going to bring it into your future present moment, right? So we do have to have the discipline to say enough of the story, enough of being the victim, enough of being the martyr, enough of being whatever archetype identity it is that we're attached to. Come into the feeling. And then you can use these kind of states of being, frequency bands, radio channels, whatever you want to call them, as a bit of a barometer. Again, not better or worse, but if we are evolving into and wanting to move into a greater state of harmony and bliss and joy and gratitude within ourselves, with each other, and as a global collective, as a humanity, because I think we do. I think we've played this game of division and separation and suffering for long enough. We're done with it. So then what are the ways that we can make the difference? How can we be a part of that change? We have to check in with ourselves on a daily basis to see which radio channel am I choosing? Which one am I staying in? And again, you might ping pong, you might seesaw between the two, but can you bring yourself into that state of unconditional love more often? Can you show up with integrity and authenticity, knowing that those are your superpowers to bring you into that higher frequency state? And if you really want to change the world, you can get caught up on political opinions and perspectives and choices and who, this person and this party, but it's kind of all really a distraction. What's going to change the world is how you show up in it, period. If each and every single one of us did that, we would change the world so quickly, it would be like a blink of an eye. But again, the challenge is the habit. The challenge is the distraction. The challenge is the illusion of the 3D, which is very dense and it's very complex and it's full of all that stuff, right? You go online and it's just going to trigger division immediately because that's kind of the way that it's been set up to, right? So we've got to be really cognizant and aware and discerning. Do I want to give my focus and my energy? That's what is being collected right now, is your attention. Your attention is precious. Your attention is powerful. So recognize, where am I placing that attention? And the invitation, I always use the analogy of, on planes, they say if the masks drop down, you put yours on first before you help others, because if you don't have the oxygen, you can't help other people, right? Self-care is precedent. And it's not selfish, it's self-giving, it's self-generous, it's self-loving. You cannot unconditionally love someone else if you don't unconditionally love yourself. We are experiential beings. We have to know what it feels like first in order to be able to give it. Right? So I'm sure a lot of you know this already, but it's like one of those things where we have to keep on hearing it again and again and again. There's nothing new here, right? But it's reminding ourselves we're coming out of not just our own habit, but the habit of humanity for hundreds of years, right? We're shedding our ancestors' stuff and their baggage as well, right? So there was something else I wanted to say, and it escaped me. We'll see if it comes back. But the invitation is to bring your awareness into these two different states of being. And so if you want to boil it down to its simplest form, based off of what Jim Self was talking about, is, are you in a state of I don't like me? Or are you in a state of I like me? Because one is going to show us that either we're in judgment, or it might not even be I don't like me. It might be, oh, I don't like others right now. And again, there's no right or wrong here. There's no judgment, but recognize, how does it make me feel? What are the things that come with that? Am I afraid of other people? Am I angry at other people? Am I judging other people? Right? How does that make me feel? What kind of energy am I in that moment? Or am I in the I like me, and you know what? Everyone's trying their best, and we're different and diverse, and we have different opinions, but everyone is just trying their best, and in their heart of hearts, they all want the same thing. They all want happiness and peace. So how can we be more accepting? How can we be more loving? How can we metaphorically have our arms and our heart open more to one another? Then you will feel that, what is that energy like to be in? We're cultivating and fine-tuning our awareness of energy. That is the currency of the future, is how do things energetically feel? Because what things look like, we don't even know what's real anymore. I mean, with AI, it's ridiculous, right? And I see people get caught. I really don't like going onto like Facebook, and especially Facebook. But there was something that to me was so clearly AI generated, like so clearly. And it was such like just putting out bait. And it was like, wow, I observed as people fell for it. And it's like, but discernment, people, discernment. Let's like really be discerning. And can you feel how that brings you into the energy of I want to fight and division and see you were wrong and I was right. And it's like, whoa, it actually doesn't even matter. To me, it was very clear that it was AI generated, but it actually doesn't matter. If it brings you into that frequency of division and hatred and judgment, you get to choose. You get to choose. Do I want to be in that state of being? Or do I want to unplug from that and actually just be the change, be the peace that I want to see, be the acceptance that I want to see, be the unconditional love that I wish was in the world? Tune out all the noise and distractions, all a game. It's all a game. Now, okay, that's the thought came back in, so I'm going to share it before I let you go. So Jim Self was saying we're actually always in a state of 5D. Because remember what I said earlier, we are just coming back home. It's not even an evolution. It is an evolution, and I'll explain why. But really, we're just coming back to who we truly are and who we've truly been, always been. We're just remembering. And I've heard other people, I think it was even Darius Wright that was talking about this, but he was saying we're always in 5D, but what happened is that we chose to play this game of 3D because it had never been done before. And if you look at this from the perspective, and you may believe this or you may not, but there's loads of people, there's a lot of information that you could go down this rabbit hole and learn about it. And again, see what feels right for you. But if you imagine that consciousness kind of split off from itself to have an experience of itself. So everything is a different angle, all eyes of consciousness, source consciousness, right? So that's why I'm an angle of source consciousness. You're an angle of source consciousness. The butterfly's an angle of source consciousness. And I had a psilocybin journey where I really experienced that. It's like, ooh, this is what it's like to be a butterfly. This is what it's like to be a tree root. This is like what it's like to be a part of a peacock feather. And all of it is consciousness to varying degrees and levels and complexities or simplicities. And it's just all the same thing, but from a different lens, because consciousness gets to see itself with this. So that had been played over eons, right? And then there's a whole story and history about it, which actually I think Jim Self is one of those people that talks about it on the Just Tap In podcast with Emilio Ortiz. It's a really lovely conversation between them. So I would recommend checking that out. But then there was this kind of like interesting thing of like, oh, what if we played that which we are not? What if we played separation? Because actually we're all of the one. But what if we played being separate? What if we played not being the natural state of unconditional love, but conditional love? And so it was kind of a game that he said, we played the game out of, we're always in the state of 5D, quote unquote. It's not a place, it's a state of being. But we drop down into this lower density to have the experience of that which we are not. And I think now we've played that game and like people are saying, okay, that's a wrap, right? And so then we're just coming back to our true home. We're coming back to our innate nature. But we played the game within that. And so what's beautiful about that, and actually I was speaking to this lovely couple that I met the other day. There will always be light and dark, right? There will always be light and dark. But one thing that he said that was so lovely, the husband said, was, but when there's a little bit of light, even if there's all darkness, but like, this when you're sleeping, let's say you like a dark room, but there's a little bit of light, there will always be light. You can't extinguish that, right? It makes there light in the dark. And so if you're in a state right now, or if you're ever in a state where maybe the world seems really dark, maybe it seems really hopeless, maybe it feels like, God, will there ever be light and love and peace and harmony between human beings or on this planet or whatever? Know that even you are just a tiny little beacon of light. You have created light in the darkness, and that cannot be snubbed out. It cannot. It will always create light. And if more of us create more light and more light and more light, and how do we create more light? We stand in our truth. We stand in our authenticity. We stand in our integrity. We embody all of these things and come into unconditional love. And that is the brightest light that will ever shine. Why? Because it's who you truly are and it's source itself. And that is an inextinguishable, infinite light that can never be put out. Never. So if you're waiting for some savior, turn around and look at yourself, because you are that savior. It's you. It's us together. It's all of us, individually and collectively. But we have to like ourselves, because if we don't like ourselves, we're just stuck in that density of I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy and I'm not lovable. And it's all a lie. It's all a lie. Because you were always held and birthed from that fifth dimensional, probably even higher field of you're loved. You're good enough. You're in joy. You are joy. You are in bliss. You are bliss. You get what I'm saying? So the invitation is just to continue bringing awareness. Recognize how it makes you feel. If you don't feel good, what do you need? Can you give yourself what you need so that you can come back into that place of wholeness? And then this will affect our relationships, which I'm releasing 2 episodes this week, because if you're single, go listen to that one around false intimacy. But our relationships are changing because we're no longer playing the paradigm of I need my other half to fill me, right? I need the external to fill the void inside of me. No, I am whole, and the other can enhance me. It can create a more enhanced experience, but it's not to fill or complete me. I am complete and I am whole as I am. So relationships are undergoing huge renovation right now because we're no longer playing out the codependent model anymore. We're coming into interdependence, into sovereignty, into autonomy, into authenticity, into self-responsibility, accountability, all of these things. And then from that place, we have to restructure the foundation of our relationships and the actual house of our relationship. But then it will have a greater opportunity for harmony because it will be based in unconditional love. It will be based in authenticity and integrity, so that even when you fall away from unconditional love, there is the authenticity to say, hey, I hold my hand up to that. I take responsibility. I'm sorry. I love you. And we come back to that. You always return to unconditional love, which is your natural state of being. So this is what we're moving towards within ourselves, within our relationships, within our families, within our communities, and as a global collective. This is the trajectory, if there ever was one. And it's not a straight linear line. It's all squiggly and spirally and moves through phases, and it ebbs and flows, and we ride different waves. So the most important thing is, can you remain truthful, honest, in integrity, in authenticity, with as much unconditional love for yourself as you move through the ebbs and flows of life? Yeah. Keep going. You're not alone. We're doing it all together. Just keep returning to love. Keep returning to love. That is the biggest invitation for today and always, and I include myself in that. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.